The Los Angeles Clippers, more specifically the years they've been coached by Doc, need some lotion on his lungs, signed his son over Kevin Durant, and blew 2-3-1 leads, Rivers. In his time in LA, the Clippers have been known for regular season success in all but one season, just to never make it past the second round, and on 2 occasions, losing to 2 inexperienced teams in the conference semifinals. In his time here, he had the likes of a prime Blake Griffin, a prime Chris Paul, and even a really productive DeAndre Jordan who played his role perfectly, and the dynamic duo of a Kawhi Leonard who came off of winning a championship, and Paul George. And even 5 Six-Man of the Year winners, and again, not one single third round appearance. Today, in this video, we'll be going over the failure of Doc Rivers in the playoffs, and as a Clippers head coach in general, with your boy, Alvini Linguine. Now again, this video will be on the failures of Doc Rivers in the playoffs as the Clippers head coach, and a few of his GM mistakes, along with other things, since, as y'all know, my videos are just built different. We'll be going by year, talking about the stuff the Clippers did in the regular season, the playoffs, and important stuff that happened in the offseason, with the usual Alvini charm. Now the like goal for this video is the usual 1,000 likes, and if you enjoy this type of interesting basketball content, be sure to subscribe as I do this weekly. Other than that, you already know who it is. Raleigh!
He incurred an injury dealing with weights in the weight room, so he stitched up in the left hand doing all this.
It's over, ladies and gentlemen.
In June of 2013, the Clippers traded an unprotected 2015 first-round pick for the coaching services of Glenn Doc Rivers. After this trade, we were thought to be instant contenders due to our amazing record from last year of 56-26. So with his championship, no plural, experience, he was thought to bring us over the top. But did that happen? Well, all I can say is the Clippers had an amazing season with the brand new free agent acquisitions of Darren Collison off the bench before he became a Jehovah's Witness. I hope y'all remember that, because that was a weird headline to read. JJ Redick, who came from a trade and shot lights out right out the gate, and Elmer J. Fudd. Anyways, the season went well in Doc Rivers' first season as the Clippers head coach, who had a record of 57-25 and even had Blake Griffin obtain 3rd in MVP voting and DeAndre Jordan 3rd in Defensive Player of the Year voting. Chris Paul even had an amazing year with 19 points and 10 assists a game and only on 2.3 turnovers a game. Though the 62 games played in the season was a red flag for things to come in the future. All 3 of the big 3 even made it to all NBA teams. But skipping everything else and going right into the playoffs, they went to a 7-game series against the pre-Dynasty Warriors, which went back and forth and stayed relatively close the whole time. However, the next series is the first roadblock in a very depressing 7-year stint. The series against the Thunder was close up until Game 4, where it was tied 2-2, but that's when Game 5 happened. Up to with 17.8 seconds left, Chris Paul receives the ball and goes up the court to get stripped by Russell Westbrook, and after that, Kevin Durant hits the 3 with 6 seconds left in the game. With one more play to take the lead back to make it a 3-2 series lead, this happens. One of the most efficient ball handlers loses the ball and loses the game for the Clippers. Many people called faults to the refs for things that happened during those final 17 seconds, but in the playoffs, the more clutch player wins, and in this case, Russell Westbrook and Kevin Durant came up with the win in that game and the series overall, and that ends the 2013 season. After that embarrassing loss against the Thunder, the Clippers decided to entirely entrust Doc Rivers with the whole ship as they gave him the position of president of basketball operations. With that gives him the ability to sign and trade whoever he wants. Now, what did he do with this power in his first season? Possibly the most sinful thing, in my opinion, that he could have ever done. He traded for his fucking nut spawn, Austin Rivers. Now, going away from that, this season in particular was the start of a tiny drop-off year to year for the team as they went 56-26 this season. Notable things that happened this season was that all of the big 3 made it to all NBA teams again, and not much else unless you consider Chris Paul playing a full 82-game season important, which it is. Now going into the playoffs, the Clippers were the 3rd seed, and their 6th seed opponent were the champions of last year, the San Antonio Spurs. Now, the question you might ask me right now is, why were they that low? Well, the context of this was the West was very tight. The lose difference to 2nd to 6th was only 2 games. So unfortunately, the Clippers had their worst test in the first round. However, they actually won in a 7-game series, which ended on a buzzer beater by Chris Paul that I cannot show you due to copyright reasons because, yeah, YouTube really be like that sometimes. Due to this win, critics thought that this could actually be the year the Clippers went all the way since they beat the champions of last year. And against the Houston Rockets in the 2nd round, a 3rd round appearance did not sound too far-fetched. Well, The Clippers won their first 3 out of 4 games in very convincing fashion, and that sweet, succulent third round appearance was ours, but they lost in Game 5. Then Game 6 happened where Josh Smith finally decided to stop playing like shit, and Corey Brewer and Terrence Davis chipped in with rare performances, and this was all while Kevin McHale was benching James Harden for shooting 5 of 20, and the Clippers had a massive lead. You just can't write this shit. Well, did they redeem themselves in Game 7? The answer is no. After that disappointing and downright embarrassing performance that Doc Rivers allowed by not stopping momentum and not changing game plans, which is a common theme in this tenure, ends another disappointing year. Well, after last year's terrible outing in the playoffs, the Clippers made changes. First off, they changed their logo that very few people liked, and then they signed a few interesting people, for lack of a better word. First off, they signed Wesley Johnson to a multi-year deal, and the only thing he's remembered for in the league is the James Harden incident. Then they signed back DeAndre Jordan for more years after, trapping a grown 6'10" man in his own house. Then they signed Paul Pierce to a multi-year deal. Remember, Doc is still calling the shots, and probably the one that hurts the most, signing Josh Smith, the man who just beat you, which I am sure gave him some dirty looks in the locker room, and trading aging Matt Barnes and Spencer Hawes for Lance to make him dance Stevenson. Yeah, the Clippers had an interesting team. The interesting team that gave them a record of 53-29 with Chris Paul and DeAndre Jordan getting all NBA honors, with DeAndre Jordan getting all NBA first team, which even as a Clippers fan definitely confused me. Also, Jamal Crawford won his third and his last Sixth Man of the Year award, and Blake Griffin only played 35 games this season due to injury. Even with this surprising season over and done with, the Clippers are now the 4th seed playing the 5th seed Portland Trail Blazers with a pissed off Damian Lillard who did not make the All-Star game. And if there is one thing you don't want, it's a pissed off Damian Lillard. Well, at least they won their first 2 games, then they lost the next 4. Now, how in the oh yeah, that makes sense. Well, yes, Chris Paul and Blake Griffin were injured in that series, and if there's one thing I know, when your 2 leading scorers are out, it is hard to make up for that type of production. And with that ends yet another disappointing season. Now this year really starts the decline of the Los Angeles Clippers. A lot of things happened this season, but let's talk about the thing that I and many Clippers fans just cannot forgive Doc Rivers for. In the summer of 2016, Kevin Durant was an unrestricted free agent, and one of the main places he was looking for to go was the Los Angeles Clippers. He just wanted a max contract, and he was quite literally a Clipper. But remember what I said a few years ago about Doc Rivers being behind the whole operation now? He is the same man who could have had Tim Duncan on the Magic if he could have just let his family on the team plane. But he said no. But in this situation, the cap space was just right for Kevin Durant. But what does Doc Rivers do? He signs his fucking nut spawn to a multi-year contract. The Clippers missed out on one of the best ISO scorers in NBA history for a role player who is easily replaceable. But because of that reason, I don't like Doc Rivers. Anyways, after that major fail of an offseason, they signed back a lot of their depth that just got 1 year older, which you can imagine means that they played worse, and that means that the main players had to work that much harder. And due to that, Blake Griffin and Chris Paul only played 61 games during the regular season. At least DeAndre still got all NBA third team. At the end of this up and down season, they ended up with a record of 51-31, which is good for 4th in the West, which means they have the honor of playing the Utah Jazz. Now this series was again thought to be another easy W, since the Jazz aren't exactly the most threatening when it comes to talent and playoff experience. But a Game 3 Blake Griffin injury and getting sauced by a 35-year-old Joe Johnson was all it took for the Jazz to beat the Clippers in 7. Another L was taken earlier than expected, put onto Doc Rivers' resume to end another disappointing season. Also, they deserved to lose that series since they played Raymond Felton for almost 20 minutes a game in the playoffs. Here we are, another season in with yet another disappointing postseason from last year, mainly due to Blake Griffin's injury and not being able to stop a senior citizen. But talks around the sports media world was that the Clippers needed a good change. Well, that's just what they made, some really big changes. First, on June 28, 2017, they traded a 32-year-old Chris Paul to the Houston Rockets to pair it with James Harden in exchange for Pat Bev, Sam Decker, Lou Will, Montrezl Harrell, DeAndre Liggins, this guy, and a 2018 first-round pick. They also waived Paul Pierce. Now, the trade of Chris Paul was met with some very mixed reviews, but to some it felt justified. As a Clippers fan myself, it made sense since his playoff performances was usually met with injury or just plain out losing, so it was time for a breath of fresh air. They even traded away an aging Jamal Crawford for Danilo Gallinari to further go away from the Lob City pass. All great moves from Jerry West, the new GM, because of how piss poor a certain someone was doing. Unfortunately, that meant Austin Rivers was taking over the starting point guard duties. Ew. But the season was met with very inconsistent play at first from the players, to the point that the Clippers traded their longtime franchise player in Blake Griffin, and even after giving him a huge extension over the summer. Again, this trade, just like the Chris Paul trade, was met with a lot of criticism as the Clippers just signed him to a huge extension just to trade him away. In my opinion, he was getting injured a lot, and being stuck with that type of contract with him only playing so many games only meant more disappointment onto his career and the Clippers themselves. The Clippers ended up getting back Avery Bradley, who was having his own troubles in Detroit, Tobias Harris before his blow up, and Boban. Just Boban. After that, the Clippers found themselves with a new sort of identity, which actually ended up giving them a better record since Blake was traded. Montrezl Harrell was able to find his stride in the league, Tobias turned into a 20-point per game scorer with his time with the Clippers, Lou Will scored 22 points off the bench and again won another 6th Man of the Year award, and DeAndre Jordan averaged a career high in rebounds. Even though they didn't make the playoffs, the future was looking up for them in some sort of way, even with the departures of their franchise pieces, which made Doc look like a better coach than he actually was, since he was able to do more with less. Now again, this season was not thought to be a season where the Clippers could do much as a team, especially in the loaded Western Conference due to not having a star player leading the team. However, even with no star, Doc Rivers was able to turn a team of decent above average NBA players, get them to play their roles perfectly, and due to that, the Clippers was able to get a spot as the 8th seed in a loaded West, even with Tobias Harris being traded later on in that season. Things to note from this season is Lou Will winning another 6th Man of the Year trophy, while Montrezl Harrell being close second, Shai Gilgeous-Alexander looking like a productive rookie under Doc Rivers' system, Tobias again scoring 20 points per game but then traded because Jerry West did not want to give him a huge contract in the offseason, and Danilo Gallinari averaging a career high with the LA Clippers. Now in the playoffs, the Clippers were placed as the 8th seed like I said earlier, and were forced to go against the absolute juggernaut of the 2010s decade that was the Golden State Warriors to be the first round fodder. And even though everybody thought it was just going to be an instant clear sweep, they were able to beat them twice. Once on their home court while coming down from a 31-point deficit, and the other one in Game 5. But in Game 6, KD told us to basically go fuck ourselves as he scored 50 points on us. But with that series, the NBA was forced to notice that a team of great role players could actually go toe-to-toe with the eventual runner-ups in the finals. And with the cap space to add another star to the team, this team could be an instant title contender. This next summer can be so important, so everything must be done correctly, and Jerry West is the man to get it done. Right? Well, after a semi-successful postseason, considering where most people put the Clippers in the beginning of the season, how would the Clippers management add to this already stacked team depth-wise? Well, on seemingly the same night, the Clippers signed Kawhi Leonard, but on the condition that they also obtained OKC Thunder's guard, Paul George, which they did for exchange for the Clippers' entire fucking future. They traded Danilo Gallinari, Shai Gilgeous-Alexander, and 7 first-round picks for the services of Paul George. Now, at first, people thought the trade was completely worth it, as at the time, the Clippers now obtained 2 of the better two-way wings in the league, and with the amazing depth of Lou Will and Montrezl Harrell. Plus, with how Doc Rivers managed a team with less talent, the sky was the limit for them. Now, the true question is, at the end of the day, was it all worth it? No. Now, the Clippers did have a good season in 2019 with the 4th best record in the league and 2nd in the Western Conference. Montrezl Harrell won 6th Man of the Year, and Kawhi even got 2nd Team All-NBA. And even in preparation for playoff basketball, they added some more scoring options in Marcus Morris. Coming into the playoffs, the Clippers were looking to make a splash. First was the series against the fake 7th-seed Mavericks, and it was a hard-fought series, almost literally, with blowouts, bad coaching decisions, and injuries. All in all, the Clippers won it in 6, even with the inconsistent play of Paul George and the bad coaching of Doc Rivers. The more talented team ended up winning at the end. However, sometimes talent does get outmatched by a better coached team. What do I mean by this? Well, the next opponent ended up being the Denver Nuggets, a relatively inexperienced team who just happened to come down a 3-1 lead against the Utah Jazz, and that was now the next team in the way. Now, the series at first went just as expected. The Clippers had a 3-1 lead on top of the Denver Nuggets. However, well, yeah, they blew another 3-1 lead. Now, this was Doc Rivers' second as the Clippers head coach and third of his career, mainly due to, again, bad coaching decisions like not calling a timeout when Nuggets went on runs, not managing the hectic locker room as we already had a bad culture, etc, etc, etc. But yeah, the aftermath wasn't pretty. Memes were made, Clippers fans were harassed, shit, even the players were harassed. Some more deserved than others. But with that ends the tenure of Doc Rivers in Los Angeles as he move on to, greener pastures. All in all, Doc Rivers' tenure in Los Angeles has been anything far from what was expected from him. Playoff failures, coaching failures, injuries here and there, and finally the most damaging thing in his coaching career, the 3-1 leads. But it really makes you wonder if he's actually a good coach. He has that one championship with the Celtics against Kobe, and then anything other than that has basically been blunders. He could have had something in Orlando if he just would have let Tim Duncan's family fly on a damn plane and would have stayed competitive in LA if it wasn't for his questionable coaching decisions and the low-key thing that no one talks about, his questionable GM decisions. His coaching career will definitely be one to remember in the history of the NBA for years to come. Anyways, with that being said, what do you think about my thoughts about Doc Rivers' coaching career with the Clippers? All replies will be appreciated in the comments below as I read all of them and respond to a good bit of them. Again, like the video for more weekly basketball content, check out my social medias for the inside life of Alvini and other channel news, check out my Twitch where I stream weekly and have to go through shit like this all the time. And lastly, if you want to talk to your boy, there is always my Discord. Links in the description. With all that out of the way, this is your boy, Alvini Linguine, saying peace. Also, come on, Doc Rivers, we could have had KD, dumbass nigga.